Good evening, everybody. Please be seated. Good evening, guests, members of the Council, members of the public in the gallery and everyone watching on webcast. Can we have some quiet, please? Chief Executive, can you please advise those attending of the arrangements for this evening?
Councillors, guests, officers and members of the public are advised in the event of the fire alarm sounding, please leave the Town Hall as indicated by Council staff and congregate in Queen's Gardens until advised by Council staff that it is safe to return. In order for members to be heard in the chamber and public gallery and for those watching the webcast, councillors are reminded to switch their microphones on when speaking and to switch them off at all other times. Councillors, officers and members of the public are reminded to leave the meeting should you wish to make or receive a telephone call. With this exception, you are able to record the meeting if you wish, but please refrain from taking photos or filming people in the public gallery. Can I also politely ask the guests in the public gallery refrain from leaning over the barrier when recording or photographing the meeting, as there are members sat directly underneath. This meeting is being webcast live, and a recording of this meeting will also be available from the Council website from tomorrow.
Thank you very much indeed, Chief Executive. Before I move on to apologies for absence, Councillor Collins has asked me to advise members and members of the public that he may need to stand during the evening as he has a back injury. So if you see him standing, I won't tell him to sit down. I don't want to further injure his back. So thank you very much. Chief Executive, apologies for absence.
Apologies for absence have been received from Councillors Bennett, Thomas, Thompson, Wright and Traccas-Lawler. Apologies for lateness have been received from Councillor Neal. We've got
any other apologies for late arrival? Ollie? Sorry, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also have apologies for lateness for Councillor Paul Scott and Councillor Patricia Hay-Justice.
Minutes. Item 2 is the minutes of the last meeting. And does the Council approve the minutes of the ordinary Council meeting held on the 29th of January 2018? If so, please say yes. Thank you very much indeed. Disclosure of interest. Item 3 is disclosure of interest. Can members please say yes to confirm that their disclosures of interest forms are accurate and up to date? And any other declarations that members may wish to make during the meeting should be made orally. Can I? Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Urgent business. I've not been advised of any urgent business, so there is no urgent business to be considered this evening. Moving on to announcements, I would like to congratulate Councillor Henson on the birth of her second child last week. And it's great to see her looking so wonderful this evening. Thank you very much indeed, and congratulations. You had a daughter. A son. Sorry. The grapevine is not working as well as it might.
Liam Terence Henson.
Fantastic. Well done. Congratulations to both you and your husband. While I'm making announcements, I'd also like to thank Councillor Manju Shahul Hamid and indeed her whole family and many of her friends who organised a very successful cultural event at Trinity School on Sunday evening, where we had a magnificent 21 voluntary groups and creative organisations who entertained a fantastic audience, and I think we made about £2,000. So we'd really like to say thank you very much to Councillor Manju Shahil Hamid. As I say, all her families clearly got two very talented young men in her family as well, who played for us on the evening. Superb event. Councillor Newman, do you have any announcements to make?
I don't, Madam Mayor, no. But I would like to... is this the appropriate place? No, it isn't. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, item 6 is the Council tax and budget. Now, this item is split into 4 parts this evening. The first section shall be questions to the leader, for which we have a total of 15 minutes. The second section will be questions to the Cabinet for Finance and Treasury, for which we have a total of 15 minutes. Leader?
This is, I understand, the appropriate place,
okay,
Madam Mayor, to say that with cross-party agreement, I'm proposing that we move straight to the debate.
Thank you very much. Well, we shall now do that. Councillor Pollard.
You want me to second it? Happy to second, Madam Mayor.
I thought you were intimating that, but you didn't speak. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. So we will move on to the debate. And Councillor Newman, you are to move and to speak.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Can I begin by thanking Councillor Simon Hall and our Finance Director, Richard Simpson, along with both their teams, for their hard work that has tonight ensured we present a balanced, stable and sound budget to this Council, and have delivered after 4 years council tax for local services that remain below inflation. Delivering such a strong budget in the face of ongoing Tory cuts and austerity is not to be underestimated, and has allowed us, even in the face of those government cuts, to deliver our ambitious for Croydon manifesto. Madam Mayor, nobody who was in this chamber for Cabinet last night could have failed to be moved by the pride and passion those young people spoke about, re what will be their on-side youth zone in Selhurst next year. On-side over £3 million of council funding, matched by the private sector and the Queen's Fund. The on-side legacy youth zone, the most significant investment in our young people in Croydon for a generation, and happening because this Labour Council has made it a priority. Madam Mayor, a Labour budget delivering more investment in our street cleaning, a Labour budget funding the building of new schools and new homes, a budget transforming and regenerating the Fairfield halls, a budget built on fiscal prudence, but equally a budget built on Labour values. Values of equality, fairness and fighting injustice. A Labour Council that is leading our borough's London living wage commitment, equally committed to supporting the White Ribbon campaign against the hate crime that is domestic violence, that is committed to and is delivering the first retrofitting of sprinklers in London in our tower blocks. A Labour Council that has introduced in the teeth of fanatical Tory opposition our hugely successful landlord licensing scheme on the side of local people and protecting the rights of local tenants. And it is this Labour Council that has given the voluntary sector the financial stability they asked for to do their job. A Labour Council that didn't walk past on the other side of the road when the Tories cut the income of the poorest on universal credit, but chose to intervene and support them financially. And Madam Mayor, a Labour Council that just a month ago, as the Tories' friends Carillion went into liquidation, intervened publicly and directly and brought every one of our libraries back into community ownership and returned them to the local communities that use them and value them so much. And what starker contrast could be seen between the two sides of this chamber. Croydon Tories, who first tried to close, then sold off our libraries, arrogantly ignoring the overwhelming public opposition to their plans, and this Labour Council returning our libraries to the people. Madam Mayor, every library safe with Labour, every library would be with their cuts agenda, immediately back in jeopardy with the Tories. And let's reflect again where the Tories left Croydon just 4 years ago. A £100 million budget fiscal black hole, Councillor Fisher told the Croydon Advertiser in May 2014. Our streets filthy, with no fly tippers prosecuted. The Tory council leader taking a secret £11,000 pay rise as services were cut. The windy streets were covered in rubbish. The Riesco collection sold off. The clothes size went up all over town. Madam Mayor, Croydon lived through and survived a Tory nightmare, but we can't ever afford to go back to that place again. And the Tories have not changed. On this side of the chamber, we accepted responsibility for the failure to deliver at the pace required the improvements that are now happening in our children's services. Yet Councillor Pollard, having taken no responsibility for a service he ran for years, then pursued his personal attacks on Councillor Flemming and remained silent as his government cut and cut again money for children's and adult social services, and his own Tory council, when in power, slashed funding for youth services across our borough. Madam Mayor, it's the rank hypocrisy of some opposite that offends so much, and it's the arrogance of some opposite that offends equally. For 3 long years, you voted against or abstained from supporting our investment in older and vulnerable people. For 3 long years, you voted against small increases in local taxes that supported, among many other things and many other policies, investment into housing. And then just before elections, we hear from Councillor Pollard in the press last week, you are considering, although we shall see in a minute, supporting either this budget tonight, part of this budget, or the council tax, or who knows, perhaps for the first time in 4 years, your government's adult social care precept. Well, perhaps from the same people that brought us the £25 bribe attempt of the electorate last time out, 4 years ago, attempted to bribe the electorate of Croydon with £25 of their own money. We should not be surprised, but it is utterly shameless, and the people of Croydon have seen through it. Madam Mayor, with Labour, Croydon is now London's growth borough. Companies investing in and locating to Croydon. Network Rail announcing yesterday their commitment to the much-needed East Croydon and Brighton Main Line upgrade. Crystal Palace FC committing their future to Croydon. Westfield and Hammerson and 7,000 jobs. No longer a plan on the back of a fag packet, but with this Labour Council a reality. Hundreds of new affordable homes on site, nearly every one of them opposed by the Tories. Croydon, with Labour, proud of our cultural bid that came so close today, but a bid that reflected our journey with Councillor Godfrey from the cultural desert we inherited in this borough, and a borough that now celebrates with Thornton Heath Stormzy, both when he launches his album in Box Park and when he collects the Brit Awards last week. A borough that celebrates community art across the borough, a borough that supports Box Park, and will a Labour council that will be proud to reopen the Fairfield Halls in early 2019. Madam Mayor, Croydon can't afford to go back to Tory cuts, filthy streets and a party that celebrates austerity. We still have a long way to go, but I'm confident that this budget tonight, a Labour budget built, yes, on sound finances, but a Labour budget built on Labour values, will ensure Croydon remains London's growth borough, a borough where all will have the opportunity to gain from that growth, a 21st century town committed to a sustainable green agenda, a town that celebrates our diversity, London's largest borough with the largest youth population, a city in all but name on the edge of the greatest global city in the world. And this budget tonight secures Croydon's future. It secures the vital public services and frontline services that the people of this town have told us make the difference to their lives. It secures a council that will have stable and sound finances for the next 4 years. And the people of Croydon will perhaps reflect just how close we might have come 4 years ago when you look at what's happened in Northamptonshire and the stark similarities with what was happening here just 4 years ago. Madam Mayor, Croydon is in a good position. We have a platform to drive that growth and a platform, as I say, to make sure all benefit from that growth, but there is a long way to go. Madam Mayor, in conclusion, I commend this budget. It is a Labour budget built on Labour values that promotes opportunity for all, but supports and cares for our most vulnerable. A Labour budget for a Labour Croydon and a Labour budget for a Labour victory in May. I move.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hall, do you second the recommendations?
I second and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much. I now call upon the Leader of the Opposition to speak. You have no more than 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This budget is a testimony to the failure of this administration to manage the town's finances properly. Every time budgets are discussed in this chamber, the leader moans at length about the current government and how everything bad is the government's fault. He quotes misleading statistics, he did it last night, which suggests that the council's income from the government has been cut by 70%, whilst consistently failing to mention...
Madam Mayor, on a point of personal explanation...
I sat there and just listened to you in silence. How about extending the same courtesy?
I wasn't lying. Councillor Cummins made that statement last night, and Councillor Cummins confirmed that the graph that he was shown by Councillor Hall was indeed accurate. So I would ask Councillor Pollard to withdraw that remark. It's not the facts.
It is a fact, and it would be really nice if you didn't pop up and down like a demented jack-in-the-box while other people are speaking. Now, where were we? Oh, yes. The fact that you forget to mention routinely that the replacement of core grants by business rates, you forget to mention the growth in the number of ring-fenced funds. Yeah, for sure. Local government has taken its fair share, or perhaps even more than its fair share, of cuts in spending needed to balance the national books. And I don't want to spend this speech harping on about the past, but I can't listen to the leader's rant tonight without reminding him that the reason for the cuts is entirely down to his party's ineptitude in government. Blair and Brown were elected 20 years ago on a plan to double public spending, and they did. But they didn't do it honestly. They didn't make it sustainable within our income, so that when Brown trashed the economy in 2008, there was no way to avoid the need to reduce spending. You titter away, but that's a fact. The alternative is to carry on splashing the cash and leave it to our children and grandchildren to sort out the mess. Labour bang on all the time about how they hate so-called austerity. They constantly claim that Tories love austerity, are ideologically committed to austerity. Well, I've got news for you. We don't like it either. But unlike you, we won't shy away from the need to keep the nation's finances in balance, for this generation to pay for what it has and not pass on the debt to the next generation. And if Labour is to have any credibility in calling on there to be more spent on local government, it has to show how it can be done whilst also allowing us to keep national debt under control. Labour wants to spend money on the NHS, education, the police, you name it, they want to spend money on it. It wants to renationalise great swathes of industry. I could forgive you for calling for more to be spent on local government if that was all you're calling for, but you're not. You want more money for absolutely everything except the armed forces, which your party leader nationally doesn't believe in. So let's not have any more of this, it's all the government's fault piffle. Your spending power is going up, not down. And we're on a journey together to a place where we raise our income locally and we decide how to spend it locally. And that will leave administrations like yours horribly exposed. Because the truth is, you lost control of this town's finances years ago. You haven't yet set a budget for the People Department that you've been able to stick to. Every February you set a budget. Every year by September you're admitting you can't stick to it. If you'd been able to stick to your own budgets, you wouldn't have had to put up council tax in this town at all, because you've overspent by a total of £33 million in 4 years in just one department. It's also true to say that you'd be taking a lot more in council tax next year if you hadn't stalled, delayed and prevaricated on all the major town centre developments. If thousands of town centre flats had actually been built by now, we would be taking in £6 or £7 million of additional council tax next year. But with some regret, we have to accept that you haven't controlled the budget, and therefore the tax increases you're proposing are sadly necessary. In your 4 years of administration, you've put up council's take by 17%. That's considerably more in 4 years than the previous Conservative administration did in 8. But I guess we should consider ourselves lucky, because when you last lost office in 2006, your 4-year increase was over 50%. So I suppose that counts as being let off. And we all know that without the current capping regime, you'd be something like that now, if you possibly could. But we accept that whoever has to implement this budget, and we hope and believe it will be this party, is going to have to deal with the mess you've created, and that means this level of council tax is inevitable. So we will, with great regret, vote for these increases, whilst noting that the need for them is entirely down to this administration's financial incompetence. In terms of what we will do differently if we form the administration post-May, we're going to sort out recycling again so that we're not wasting millions of pounds on landfill tax as you do. That's just financial good sense as well as being the right thing to do. We'll proactively go out and find fly tipping with our fly tip busting teams. We'll introduce the free bulky waste collections outlined by Councillor Clancy in his speech in the debate at January Council, and we're very pleased that last night Councillor Collins announced that he was copying this excellent Conservative policy.
Madam Mayor, I told them at the last full council meeting
you get
we are not copying
Councillor
the
Collins,
Conservative
what is your point of order?
Is misleading the public because we are not copying their policy. We introduced it. They copied us.
Is there any possibility you could shut up and let me finish my speech? We will get back into house building council houses again, unlike this administration who talk the talk on affordable housing, but your delivery is shocking. We'll reintroduce some democracy back into this town hall, re-establishing committees which take decisions in public, most of which Labour has closed, and restoring the public's shattered faith in our planning committee. This will mean increasing the size of the Democratic Services team to ensure that they can cope with the additional transparency that we will introduce. We'll get the town centre redevelopment underway without further delay to both improve the environment of the town centre and generate the future income which will help us dig the town out of Labour's hole. We'll ensure that our bin contractors are always on their toes by giving residents the right to claim back £10 every time the teams miss collecting their bins. We will invest in our parks, introducing the role of head parkkeeper and ensuring that there is proper capital funding available to develop the parks properly and that people manage them. Under Labour, all the money for parks has been frittered away on consultants, leaving nothing to spend on the parks themselves. We will also turn one of our parks into a super park with greatly expanded facilities and attractions. And we'll introduce area budgets to complement the ward budget system to give ordinary residents in our districts the ability to make the services they receive match local need. We'll introduce a voluntary contribution element to council tax to give residents in the largest properties the opportunity to contribute directly to projects aimed at getting the homeless off the streets, keeping young people away from gangs and reducing social isolation. In 10 minutes, I can only cover a few of the things that are in our wide-ranging local election manifesto, which will be published in full in just a few weeks. But rest assured, the manifesto is packed with exciting ideas which put our residents first and create a place which works for everyone. Madam Mayor, to conclude, Labour has failed this town. It's failed to deliver regeneration. It's failed to keep the streets clean. It's failed to make this an exciting place to live. In fact, just today, we find it's failed to make it a borough of culture or even win a small consolation prize. It's failed to deliver housing, and it's failed to deliver openness and transparency. This budget is an admission of failure, but despite that, it's a budget we can work within, and we can finesse it to start the process of rebuilding. The people of Croydon deserve better than this hopeless Labour Council, and on the 3rd of May, I am confident they're going to get it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very, very much, Councillor Pollard. Before I move on, I would like everyone to listen to whoever is speaking. And can I just gently remind you of 1.8 of the manifesto, of the, Constitution, fraudulent slip there, Constitution, the rules of debate, and please refrain from comments of a personal nature about another member. Let us respect each other in this council chamber. Moving on to the next speaker, Councillor Butler. I call on you to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When it comes to much-needed homes and homelessness prevention, there is much to celebrate in this budget. Unfortunately, when it comes to the government's understanding of the housing crisis and their lack of assistance in changing outcomes, there is little. I'm proud that Brick by Brick is now on site right across this borough, delivering much-needed homes with local lettings and sales policies that ensure local people will benefit. I am pleased that despite the government's war on social housing, Croydon Affordable Homes will deliver homes for those who need them most. And I'm glad that despite extensive opposition from the opposition, We have a landlord's licensing scheme, driving up standards in the private rented sector and ensuring that properties are decently kept. And when it comes to our own housing stock and our tenants, we will continue to maintain the decent home standard introduced by our Labour government. We will continue to invest in maintenance and improvement and repair works, ensuring £27 million goes towards creating decent places to live. And despite the government saying that they're not essential, we will continue to invest in sprinklers for our taller blocks, because, as the London Fire Brigade have said, they are not an extra, they are a must-have. The cost of sprinklers is being funded out of reserves, but we will continue to lobby central government for help with funding. We will continue to raise those issues that are affecting councils right across the country when it comes to providing affordable and decent homes. We will continue to lobby on the enforced rent reduction and that's been used to reduce the government's housing benefit bill, a reduction that has led to a loss of £13 million spent on our council homes. We will continue to lobby against the artificial borrowing cap that will affect the delivery of our core stock investment programme. And it is anticipated that within a few years we will reach that borrowing cap. And Councillor Pollard and the opposition have talked much about how they'll build council homes, but when there is a borrowing cap and we're at the peak of that borrowing cap, they've never explained how they're going to do that. And given that they are not interested in any development companies or any other ways of building affordable homes, it will be interesting to see. We will continue to lobby against the sell-off of our so-called high-value council homes, needed now more than ever. And we'll continue to lobby so that councils can make proper use of right-to-buy receipts without enforced government restrictions. And we'll continue to lobby on behalf of our residents on the impact of the introduction of universal credit. In Croydon, as predicted, this has begun to have an impact on our rent collection rates. Madam Mayor, I want to say a huge thank you to our staff in the housing and gateway departments. Their prevention work has made a huge and significant difference to the outcomes of the people of Croydon. We've also seen a significant reduction in the use of temporary and emergency accommodation, going against the grain in London, creating better financial outcomes for the council's budget, but more importantly, better outcomes for our residents. I welcome the input we've had into district centre regeneration, most significantly in New Addington,
Councillor
South
Butler,
Norwood.
could I ask you to come to the end,
Certainly.
please? Thank you.
So I welcome the investment in our district centres right across the borough. There is much to welcome in this budget, Madam Mayor. I support it.
Thank you very much indeed. I call upon Councillor Hale to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, it's coming to the end of this council cycle, and we can take the opportunity to look back and assess this budget in the light of this Labour administration's delivery over the past 4 years. Everyone in this chamber knows that there's a housing crisis in Croydon, and there are hundreds of families across our town who still live the daily nightmare of living in unsuitable and cramped accommodation. Labour was elected to office in 2014, saying it would provide new council homes and seek to replace the worst of the borough's housing stock. That was a great ambition. However, 4 years later, not one council house has been started and completed by this administration. Labour then decided to put all of their eggs into one basket, pouring vast sums of council taxpayers' money into Brick by Brick, a company whose business plan is so secretive that we're only allowed to see highly selected glimpses of their activities. And the outcome to date? £250 million of Croydon Council taxpayers' money and not one completed property. And an awful lot of very upset local residents. So many, in fact, that a new member of staff has had to be taken on to manage residents' concerns. In 2014, the Labour manifesto said you would make landlords responsible when old mattresses and pieces of furniture are dumped in front gardens or the street when tenants moved out. This Labour Council has taken in a whopping £10.5 million through the Landlord's Licensing Scheme. But the problem's worse than ever. It looks awful and residents hate it. But only 2 landlord licences have been revoked, and that was only because they lived overseas. And far too many families are still living in quite appalling, unsuitable, privately rented accommodation. Responsible landlords and our residents deserve much better than this. Labour was elected on promises to have greater participation in the arts in our borough and to ensure our parks are of the highest quality. But the full reopening of the Fairfield Halls has been severely delayed from the original summer 2018 to a potential date in 2019. And the Parks Department has been completely decimated of staff. Having spent all the money on consultants, there's no money left to actually run the service. And in fact, the Labour Mayor of London has such little confidence in Croydon. Croydon's now been completely dismissed as a borough of culture and not even a consolation prize. It is a great pity that Labour has got us into such a parlous financial position, but we must ensure the delivery of essential services, so I am reluctantly supporting this budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. I now call upon Councillor Ali to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Politics is about choices, and this government continues to choose to shirk its responsibilities for local services. Contrary to Councillor Pollard's highly revisionist account of the international banking crisis, the Tory-controlled LGA itself points to an overall funding gap for councils in England alone of £5.8 billion by 2020. The government's solution to that? Ask residents to step in. The government's final settlement for local government offered a one-off payment for adult social care and, scandalously, nothing at all for children's services, 2 of the biggest commitments in our budget. Instead, the government lifted the cap on councils to raise council tax by an additional 1%, making very clear their judgment that residents and not public investment should shoulder growing need. Over 70% of councils are doing what we are proposing tonight, levying the adult social care precept and raising council tax. That is the responsible choice by this Labour administration, enabling us not only to balance the budget, but also to invest in all our residents and not just those who need us most. Madam Mayor, unlike the government, the Mayor of London is doing everything in his power to protect London from the impact of austerity. We know the police are facing cuts at unprecedented levels. I've talked before about the £1 billion that will have been taken out of their budget by 2020-21, and the Commissioner has warned that officer numbers will fall well below 30,000 for the first time in a generation. In sharp contrast, the Mayor is not only putting every bit of his precept towards London's emergency services, but he's also using business rate income for the first time to fund an additional 1,000 police officers from next year. He's also backing the fire service with that investment, versus this government, who has ignored their advice for a 3rd time that sprinklers in this borough are essential safety measures. Madam Mayor, this Labour administration is also taking action. At a time when our partners are under extreme pressure, we will be boosting the Council's enforcement function with an additional 20 officers. That's a 50% increase of its complement. Increasing our own uniformed presence on our streets will provide residents with important reassurance and the confidence that we're on their side, taking prompt action when people do the wrong thing. Madam Mayor, the most serious responsibility this authority has is the safety of our young people. And Councillor Flemming's announcement last night of a community fund of £250,000, £250,000, a powerful signal to our communities that it's together that we will beat the rise in violence against our young people and help build their confidence that this is a truly joint endeavour. Madam Mayor, these are the choices that this Labour administration has made possible through its responsible financial stewardship, choices made in the interests of all our communities and on the side of residents, all in stark contrast to the opposition's support for a government that remains out of touch. I'd like to give my thanks to Councillor Hale and to all the officers involved in this budget, and I support the budget.
Thank you very much indeed. I now call upon Councillor Mohan to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, after 4 years of this Labour administration, I think this is a good time to take stock of where this administration has got to in actually delivering for the people of Croydon. And my focus today will be on streets, environment and transport. Councillor Collins has had his cheap slogans, he's printed his T-shirts and he's fronted numerous photo ops. But has he really delivered for the people of Croydon? Yeah. When the Conservatives left office, the recycling rates were 44%. But in the 3 years under Councillor Collins, we have gone from being one of the best-performing boroughs in London to one of the worst. There were 15,000 recorded fly tips in 2014, but this has now skyrocketed to over 25,000 by 2017. Turning to the budget then, and what is it actually delivering for a clean and green Croydon? The much-publicised £5 million savings in the waste management contract is actually just a bit of accounting trickery, where they've moved spending from revenue to capital and called it a saving. So no prizes for guessing that which highly qualified accountant is advising Councillor Collins. The budget shows that he will be paying a whopping £1 million more a year towards landfill charges. Councillor Collins, this is a reflection of your abject failure to increase our recycling rates, money which could have been much better spent on delivering frontline services. Then, in the budget, we've also seen there's going to be closure of our neighbourhood recycling centres, something very popular with residents, especially the elderly. And yesterday, Councillor Collins pinched one of our manifesto pledges around the new bulk waste collection. Of course, in a few weeks' time, Councillor Collins, and to the Labour Party, we are releasing our manifesto, and you're happy to pinch as many promises as you want, because they will all be in the best interests of Croydon residents. Moving on then to transport and environment, led by Councillor King, where here too we've seen a litany of waste and poor financial management. Over £1 million was spent of money, vital road safety money, was spent on putting up 20-mile-per-hour road signage, rather than actually targeting investment in those hotspots where accidents actually occurred, and which would have genuinely reduced casualties and made our streets safer. The planned closures of car parks to accommodate brick by brick is going to cost taxpayers a huge £500,000 a year, at a time in lost revenue, at a time when we can ill afford it. Of course, we all want to provide affordable housing here in Croydon, but not at the expense of vital car parking space, which will have a hugely detrimental effect on our businesses and residents. Well, you can always build homes in spaces, but to say that cutting parking spaces won't have a detrimental effect on businesses and shoppers is completely barking mad. The budget also says that there will be an increase.
Councillor Mohan, can I ask you to come to a close,
yeah,
please?
There will also be yeah, absolutely. They seem to want it. Yeah, thank you. So we see that there's going to be an increase in pay and display charges, with absolutely no announcement on what the specifics are and when this will be implemented.
Councillor Mohan, please come to a close.
Budget. So, Madam Mayor, I wait for the 4th of May, when we will have a Conservative administration in Croydon, and when we will genuinely deliver a prudent budget and policies designed for the people of Croydon.
Please sit down. Thank you. Can we have some quiet, please? I now call upon Councillor Lewis to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to speak in support of this balanced Labour budget, an ambitious but responsible budget that prioritises the needs of residents of New Addington and residents across Croydon, delivering improved services and facilities for them, and rejecting the pessimism and relentless negativity of Croydon Tories. Madam Mayor, I am proud to represent New Addington, a strong community, but one where significant need exists, need that has been increased and exacerbated by Tory austerity. New Addington was previously overlooked by the then Conservative Council, but 8 years of Tory neglect have now been put to bed by this Labour administration. Madam Mayor, the capital expenditure that this Labour Council has invested in New Addington is significant. £50 million would be significant for most communities, but when there has been nothing in the previous 8 years from the Conservative Council, it will be especially felt in New Addington. A new community and leisure centre, providing state-of-the-art facilities for all to use. A healthy living hub. This council working in partnership with the NHS to address the health inequalities that exist. And a new SEN school in Fieldway, along with top-quality modern community facilities. All this and more, Madam Mayor. Improvements to Central Parade, the boulders gone, a commitment to sprinklers in our tallest tower blocks, this council prioritising the safety of our tenants, funding additional police officers, working in partnership with the Met to improve the safety of our community, the community food stop to support our vulnerable families cast aside by Tory austerity, the library brought back into public service and safeguarded for years to come, and an outdoor gym funded in part from councillors' ward budgets for all in the community to use. So this budget represents Labour's response to the change that the people of New Addington and Croydon have chosen. And we have chosen to invest in New Addington rather than ignore and neglect it. We have chosen to support our young people rather than to implement savage cuts to youth services. We have chosen to build homes for families in need rather than ignore and condemn them to live in unsuitable and overcrowded accommodation. We have chosen to support our elderly and vulnerable residents, not to heighten the anxiety of their loved ones. We have chosen to invest in this town's cultural offer rather than to sell it off to the highest bidder. And we have chosen to work with the police and the NHS in partnership so that our communities are safer and healthier. Madam Mayor, I am proud that this ambitious Labour Council is investing in New Addington, investing in this borough's future, and is delivering with a balanced budget for all of Croydon. I commend this budget to the Council.
Thank you very much indeed. I now call upon Councillor O'Connell to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I rise in a relentlessly positive mood, Oliver, though I can't help, of course, be slightly negative around some issues. But first of all, I'd like to turn to Mayor Sadiq Khan's budget, which has been referred to today, that we in the GLA voted against last week. The Progressive Alliance of Conservatives, Green, Lib Dem, one of them, and UKIP voted against the budget. And in that paragon of democracy, despite a majority voting against the Mayor's budget...
Councillor O'Connell, are you talking about Croydon Council's budget or the Mayor of the City of London? Of the Mayor of London?
Bear with me, Madam Mayor.
Now, I would like you to get to the matter being discussed.
Please, let me continue, Madam Mayor. Bear with me. Anyway, last week we voted down the Mayor's budget. Of course, it got passed because, as Councillor Pelling knows, it needs a two-thirds majority. However, there were parts within that budget that we clearly supported, which has been referred to tonight, which is around the increased precept on the policing budget, though we did want the whole £14.21 spent actually on the police, because for reasons that I won't go into, but limited time, we felt that was a priority because the finances of the LFB at the moment don't this year require those. However, we must remember that the Mayor was able to provide that added investment due to central government, this central government giving the powers to mayors to increase through business rates devolution and new taxing powers that additional money that came to a good cause, which is policing. So I kind of disagree with Councillor Ali's rather revisionist take on public taxation, that actually it was probably the right thing to do, and I think we all agree on that. However, we do think it's time really for the Mayor to take some responsibility around that. And latest in the litany...
Councillor Collins, I am sorry...
litany of bad decisions he decided upon...
Councillor O'Connell, please.
This is twice I've been interrupted,
you
Madam
are
Mayor.
not
This is unprecedented.
You are not speaking to the debate. Can you please talk about Croydon's
the Mayor's
budget?
bad decision to grant the cultural, as has been referred to already and up by other speakers. Thank you very much. I've been bemoaning his lack of decision-making around awarding the cultural award to North London. However, turning to the council budget, thank you for your forbearance. Knife crime and serious youth violence is spiralling through the roof, and I don't see anything within this budget that is going to address the #1 priority, by the admission of the Mayor, of the main issue in London today, which is serious youth violence, which is knife crime. I see a small investment in CCTV, but when we go out to our district centres, They're crying out for more CCTV. That needs to be invested in. I don't see the money. I welcome the £250,000, but I don't see significant investment in preventing our young people entering into a life of crime. It is too little, too late after 4 years. I will support this budget for the reasons that the Leader stated, but I bemoan the performance of this Council. Thank you for your forbearance.
I now call upon Councillor Flemming to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Madam Mayor, it is a great honour to represent young people and learners in this borough. Croydon is indeed a fantastic place to work and live. We have the largest youth population of any London borough, and our children come from diverse backgrounds. Approximately 57% of children in Croydon are from an ethnic background, and with this melting pot of diversity comes so much opportunity. We have the largest looked-after children population in London and one of the highest number of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children populations as well. We are an administration that recognises the importance of the young. It is disappointing that the lack of additional funding for children's services continues to escape the focus of national government. Councils across the land continue to labour with a £2 billion shortfall in the cost of dealing with vulnerable children, and we will continue to lobby central government for our fair share. Still, I welcome the £10.5 million of growth into children's services and the £2.2 million in growth for SEND provision provided by this Labour administration. I'm looking forward to the opening of our all-through provision in the south of the borough that will ensure that young people who have autism are able to access education within this borough. I am proud of the investment provided by this administration in conjunction with the private sector and the Queen's Fund to deliver a state-of-the-art £6.5 million youth zone that will offer young people in this town a fantastic range of world-class facilities that will give them the opportunity to be able to choose their futures and the journeys that they decide that they want to take in life. I look forward to the reopening of the Fairfield Halls in 2019 that will deliver real opportunity for all in this borough to enjoy the brand new facilities. I'm proud of our decision to back the Crepton Conan Positive Direction Foundation and in more than words but with financial backing, and the difference that that is making to young people's lives is without question. The Tories slashed funding to youth provision and have no real understanding of what that has done for many in this borough. We will continue to lobby central government for funding to restore youth services in Croydon and to reverse these effects. The percentage of children attending good or outstanding secondary provision has risen to 90%, and 48% of secondary-age children now attend an outstanding school compared to 27% nationally. This is due in part to the investment that we have put into developing our schools, some existing schools, but also the new schools that are coming into this borough. I'm also, as the announcement we put forward last night, and I'll end on this, Madam Mayor, in relation to the £250,000 fund for grants to support seed funding for projects focused on preventing young people becoming involved in knife and gang crime. We will also look at helping groups to acquire additional funding
Councillor
alongside
Flemming,
this.
I do ask you to move to the end.
Madam Mayor, I support the budget.
Thank you very much. I now call on Councillor Kaplan to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Cabinet report last night showed a substantial increase in growth for the People's Department, especially children's services, because of the Ofsted failure. I accept that there are huge challenges facing Croydon and indeed historical underfunding. But for me, the culture of blame is corrosive for any organisation. If elected in May, we will be more open and collaborative. We will offer places on both the adult and children's safeguarding boards to a member of the opposition, because we want to be more transparent and indeed to have challenge, because I think that the protecting and safeguarding of our most vulnerable, young and old, is a top priority for us. The Ofsted inspection shone a light on the failures of the current administration to protect some of our most vulnerable children, and that is a fact. But I do welcome the 10 million investment and the improvement journey going forward. And I will make it crystal clear that if elected, we will support the improvement journey for our most vulnerable families and staff. But until May, we will certainly continue to challenge any drift or delay or political weakness going forward until May. There is still growth around our looked after children, despite many reviews which don't seem to have any outcome. We will certainly support all our children in care, our young children, our local children in care, and through a mentoring scheme and working with various organisations. And we have started that work working with Councillor Andy Strannock. There is a overspend, despite positive briefings with Councillor Hopley from officers. There's still an overspend on SEN, which we accept is challenging, but nevertheless there is a 2 million overspend. But there is, and we welcome the investment in children with disabilities, but such is the grave concern of parents around this area that, along with Councillor Hopley, we will work with those parents and indeed everyone involved to let them lead the design of this service and get the service that they deserve. I support the youth zone and the offer for young people, but I believe that 33 million over 4 years is unsustainable going forward. We will offer, I think, a different approach. We will listen to residents, but also hear what they're saying and act upon it. We believe this is a different approach that will be welcomed by the residents of Croydon going forward at the election in May. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call on Councillor Collins to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Madam Mayor, it's deeply cynical of the Croydon Tories. After 3 years criticising our financial record, they are now supporting this budget. They don't have the courage to tell Croydon residents how they intend to embrace their government's austerity policies and exactly what they intend cutting. And history shows how each Croydon Tory administration has cut service and how each Labour administration has invested in services. In my Clean and Green portfolio from 2010 to 14, Croydon Tories cut the weekly bin collection. In 2012, Croydon Tories cut the Veolia afternoon shift that empties our street bins and picks up their orange bags. 2 Tory decisions that opened the door to a fly tipping crisis. Contrast this to Labour's investment, increasing the number of street bins. Labour ensuring Veolia afternoon shift is returned in the new contract this year. Croydon Tories are only cleared 3% of fly tips in 48 hours. Contrast that to Labour making sure Veolia cleared 87% in 48 hours. And what of the human resource side of Croydon Tory cuts versus Labour investment? Croydon Tories ran down enforcement officer posts to 19 and employed a private company to issue fines for people dropping cigarette butts. Result, 0 prosecutions for fly tipping. Contrast Labour's investment, 21 more new enforcement officers, motivated by this council's campaign, Don't Mess with Croydon, Take Pride. Result, thousands more fines, nearly 200 prosecutions. And for the first time since 2012, an annual fall in fly tipping, down 21%. Croydon Tories failing to monitor the Veolia street cleaning contract and bin collection contract. Not a penny in fines for missing key performance indicators, and they jest tonight that they'll do something about it. Contrast that to Labour's employing the excellent Tom Lawrence and Jackie Agger to tackle performance failures and negotiate a tougher contract. Results, hundreds of streets monitored. Veolia served over 500,000 in penalties and 2 officers employed that are respected and regularly complimented by the public and councillors of both sides. Labour's investment in a streets champion coordinator, the much-loved Tracy Bellamy. Result, 350 street champions recruited. Over 130 community clean-ups, residents taking pride in Croydon. Yet Croydon Tories and their candidates disrespect our staff, disrespect the brilliant leadership shown by Steve Isles and Andy Opie. And all they offer is more alternatives, no cuts at all. The only option they offer is this crew that are going to travel round the 458 miles of our borough 24/7 on the hope a fly tipper will dump under their noses. All for $750,000, they claim. Well, I've checked that out with Veolia and officers, and the annual cost would actually cost £12,844,344 to be precise. Clueless Tories handling residents' money. And of course the rumour that we have heard is true, must be true then, that Croydon Tories intend to introduce a monthly bin collection, like 14 other boroughs have done due to this government's cuts. And listen to them squeal. Well, I remember all of you that Croydon Tories lied to the electorate in 2010 when they told you they wouldn't cut their bin collection. Madam Mayor, I'm proud to support a Labour budget, one that gives residents 20 more enforcement officers, one that gives residents an all-year-round garden waste service, and above all, one that gives residents a free bulky waste service
Collins,
and a
can
free
you wind
goods
up
collection.
now, please?
Investment, not in cuts, and I support this budget.
Thank you very much. I now call upon Councillor Jason Cummins to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before I speak, can I just take this opportunity to thank the officers that have been involved in the production of this budget. Regardless of the policies that may go into it, it's a huge amount of work, and I commend them for the work that they've done. As a Conservative, I don't like the prospect of taxes going up. Unlike Labour, I prefer to see the hard-won earnings of Croydon Council taxpayers staying with the people that did the work. Sometimes, though, there is no better alternative, and this is where this Labour administration has led us. After 4 of the worst years on record for Cabinet members failing to achieve their budgets, and year after year the weak Labour leadership simply allowing the same thing to happen again, we are left with little choice. We've heard the usual abdication of responsibility from Labour tonight, but be in no doubt that their denials have consequences. By claiming that everything is the government's fault, they diminish the opportunity for change. After all, if there's nothing you could have done about it, then it's not down to you to find the solution. But be in no doubt a solution is desperately needed, and it is not going to come from Labour. An administration that can oversee £33 million of overspend in 4 years in one department and then claim that the Cabinet member is doing a great job is not looking to improve. So it is with reluctance that we will vote today to raise council tax this year. In future years, what happens to those budgets will be down to the people of Croydon's decision. But it's not just at council level that taxes are going up. After 8 previous years of a Conservative mayor whose record was exceptional with regard to taxation, we are now back to Labour ways in London again. And with a Labour mayor comes Labour taxation. But wait, I'll hear people say, this time the money's for the police. Well, it's interesting that, isn't it? Because actually the 32,000 complement was lowered to 31,000 by Sadiq Khan himself, taking £38 million out of their budget. He's now putting tax up to put that same money back in, to put it back where it was in the first place, whilst at the same time employing significant numbers of additional people in other areas under his own responsibility. That was his choice. The usual story is being played out again at every level of government. Labour brings tax increases, while Conservative government is taking more and more people out of paying tax altogether. If you like seeing regular tax rises in Croydon, vote Labour in May. For something different, vote Conservative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, I now call on Councillor Hale for a right of reply. Councillor, you have no more than 5 minutes.
Madam Mayor, in 2014 we inherited a £100 million hole. Not my words, but those of the outgoing Tory leader. Not that this stopped this same leader taking an 11k secret pay rise. Since then we've seen horrendous year-on-year government funding cuts, despite extra burdens, however you look at it. There are different ways of looking at these cuts, as shown in the report, a 70% grant cut since 2010. Or using the largely discredited core spending power calculation, a real terms reduction of 15% since 2015. Looking at the last 4 years, government funding has been reduced by £45 million in cash terms, a 35% cut in real terms, and over 40% when adjusted for population growth. Added to all of this is our historic underfunding and the failure to fund us properly for our work on unaccompanied asylum seeker children or being a universal credit pilot. Oh, and by the way, Councillor Pollard, ring-fence funds are exactly that and should not be confused with the core funding for general services. Shame you don't understand the basics. Lord Porter, the Tory LGA chair, said this week that many councils are now beyond the point where council tax income can be expected to plug the growing funding gap they face, and that this means councils will have to continue to cut back services or stop some altogether to plug funding gaps. Now, Tory Northamptonshire built a new HQ, did property deals and JVs. Remind you of anyone? They have gone bust, and that could have been Croydon's fate had the people of Croydon not had the sense to vote Labour in 2014. The fact is, we've got a grip on the finances. We've cut back our fixed costs. We've used our assets better. We've innovated like Gateway and our digital enabling programme. We've adopted the Think Family approach. We've got control of our contracts. We've brought services in-house, and we've overhauled our charges. We've delivered our manifesto in maintaining and enhancing the front line, protecting the vulnerable, old and young, focusing on prevention, improving services that matter to residents, and investing in the borough's future. Because we have the grip on finances, we've been able to respond to events, including putting this year some £4 million into children's services improvement. Now, in this year's budget, we've made choices where it matters, invested in children's social care, reversing the cuts supervised by Councillor Pollard. We've maintained and enhanced ward budgets. We've increased enforcement. We've increased street cleaning and introduced the new free bulky waste collection, something abolished by the previous Tories. And we provided additional funding for our young people through the Legacy Youth Zone and a new fund to work with young people at risk of knife crime, gangs and such like. And we've invested in this borough's future. Housing, infrastructure for the town, notably through the growth zone, new facilities in New Addington and schools. And let me be parochial for a moment about Fieldway Ward. 8 years of a Tory council, no investment, but a lot of cuts to services. Contrast this with the Labour years. Family centre saved from Tory closure. Community Connect and Community Food Stop for those affected by universal credit and benefits cap. A new Addington Leisure and Community Centre, a new Addington Healthy Living Hub in the area where public health is the worst in the borough, improved street cleaning, and a new £4 million community facility on the Fieldway estate, ensuring that the valuable activities in the time-expired community centres that we have now go from strength to strength. What a difference a Labour council has made. And let's turn to the Tory gimmicks. 4 years ago, in their last, or should I say last ever, budget, they tried the £25 failed bribe. The people of Croydon did not fall for it. But let's look at some of the proposals. We heard about the carer exemption a couple of months ago. Having looked at the scheme that they say it's modelled on, it would help almost nobody. A band H voluntary payment. Voluntary contributions from 600 households will somehow solve homelessness, reduce social isolation, fund youth services, and maybe solve world hunger? Now, the empty promise on council housing, undeliverable because of the Tory government HRA borrowing cap, and so many other gimmicks that simply do not add up. The opposition has said tonight that the only reason for voting council tax is our supposed mismanagement. I'm sure they'll explain that to the 70% of councils who are doing the maximum level of council tax increase and the 97% increasing adult social care precept, and that this is what the Secretary of State himself expects councils to do. So they'd reverse council tax increase of this and prior years, presumably, reverse the effect of greenways,
Councillor
parking
Hall,
charges.
I ask you to wind up, please. Thank you.
Sorry, landlord licensing, Fairfield halls. So a £100 million hole would be created, £25 million a year, closing libraries, cutting youth services, reducing bin collections, reducing care packages, and whatever more. These proposals don't have.
Councillor Hall, will you please?
Yeah. We are being honest with the people of Croydon. This administration has a strong grip on the council's finances, delivering the frontline services that matter to residents. We are protecting the vulnerable in our communities, enhancing the lives of residents,
Councillor
and investing
Hall.
in the future. I commend this budget
Thank
to the
you.
council.
Now, that does conclude the debate on this item. However, because of the change in the agenda, I'm going to ask, before we move to the vote on that, if we can have the section on the scrutiny business report, for which we will have a total of 10 minutes, and then we will move to the vote. Councillor Simons? Simons? Right.
Madam Mayor, can I just put first on record my disappointment about the change in the agenda tonight in terms of this, because it does seem rather strange to have debates before we have actually questions and statements from scrutiny. But where we are tonight, I'd just like to give an update from the work that numerous backbenchers have done over the previous months. At our December meeting, we reviewed the proposals and the funding pressures by the leader and from the Cabinet Member for Finance. And our Children and Young People's Committee, we looked at the impact on the education budget. And over the last few months, we have had a number of Q&A sessions with Cabinet members. And it's quite clear that there is an increasing demand for services, but there is a corresponding lack of resources coming through. We are also facing clear growths in pressure, particularly in services for young people, but also for the older people, and particularly the over 80s. And it is clear that the current funding, that there is a clear funding gap between those pressures and demands. I would hope that we have had a debate based on the pressures and the solutions that this Council is making tonight. Because it's clear there are only two choices that this Council is facing over the next 4 years. It will be to cut services or to raise taxes. And neither of these are ones that people want to do. This can only change if we have a central government that ends austerity and provides the fund that this Council needs. None of the statements tonight regarding from scrutiny is based on the facts of what we have heard at meetings. And I would hope that we would have the respect of opposition frontbenchers to the work that their backbench colleagues and the Labour group colleagues have done in asking questions, instead of muttering like small kids who are bored at a meeting because they want to get on to something that they consider better. But the rest of us backbenchers actually feel scrutiny is important, and we would hope that you have more respect in future.
Pardon? Moving to the vote. We are now. So we're going to have questions. Are there any questions to Councillor Fitzsimmons? Councillor Speakman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I refer the Chairman, Councillor Fitzsimmons, to paragraph 512, in which he looked at savings that can be made. Can I ask him, did he look at the savings that could be made on examination of the vast sums that are given to failed directors who have failed in their duties as far as this Council is concerned? Settlements have been made, unbeknown to members and the public. It is public money that's being spent, and I would ask him to investigate it. Thank you.
Can I interject here? Councillor Speakman, you probably just forgot that we are not allowed to debate personal matters of any staff members within this council meeting. Thank you. Any other questions to the Chairman of Scrutiny? No? Well, thank you very much. Let us move on then to the item for the debate. We are now going to move, and the three recommendations will be taken by a recorded vote. And the first vote is for Recommendation 1.1, which reads as follows. A 2.99 increase in the council tax for Croydon services, a level of increase central government has assumed in all councils' spending power calculations, so I'm advised. Chief Executive.
Members, I will now call each member by name in alphabetical order. When you are called, please indicate your intention by saying yes, no or abstain. Councillor Ali.
Yes.
Councillor Audsley.
Yes.
Councillor Avis.
Yes.
Councillor Baines.
Yes.
Councillor Bennett. That's all right, got it, thank you. Councillor Bird.
Aye.
Councillor Bonner.
Yes.
Councillor Brew.
Yes.
Councillor Butler.
Yes.
Councillor Buttinger.
Aye.
Councillor Canning.
Yes.
Councillor Chatterjee.
Yes.
Councillor Chowdhury.
Yes.
Councillor Clancy.
Aye.
Councillor Clowder.
Yes.
Councillor Collins. Yes. Councillor Creatura.
Aye.
Councillor Jason Cummings.
Yes.
Councillor Patsy Cummings.
Yes.
Councillor Fisher. Councillor Fitzsimons.
Yes.
Councillor Flemming.
Yes.
Councillor Gatland. Yes. Councillor Godfrey. Yes. Councillor Hale. Yes. Councillor Hall.
Yes.
Councillor Hayes Justice. Councillor Henson.
Yes.
Councillor Hollins.
Yes.
Councillor Hopley.
Yes.
Councillor Jewett. Councillor Kabir.
Yes.
Councillor Khan, Bernadette Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Shafi Khan. Councillor King.
Yes.
Councillor Letts.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Mann.
Yes.
Councillor Mansell.
Yes.
Councillor Dudley Mead.
Yes.
Councillor Margaret Mead.
Yes.
Councillor Mohan. Yes. Councillor Neal.
Yes.
Councillor Newman.
Yes.
Councillor O'Connell.
Yes.
Councillor Pelling.
Yes.
Councillor Perry. Yes. Councillor Helen Pollard.
Yes.
Councillor Tim Pollard.
Yes.
Councillor Prince.
Yes.
Councillor Kadir.
Yes.
Councillor Rendell.
Yes.
Councillor Ryan.
Yes.
Councillor Scott.
Yes.
Councillor Selva.
Yes.
Councillor Shahul Hamid.
Yes.
Councillor Speakman.
Yes.
Councillor Stranick.
Yes.
Councillor Thomas is absent. Councillor Thompson. Absent as well. Councillor Traccas-Lawler. Councillor Watson.
Yes.
Councillor Wentworth.
Yes.
Councillor Winborn.
Yes.
Councillor Wood.
Yes.
Councillor Woodley.
Yes.
Councillor Wright. And Councillor Young.
Yes.
You got the numbers?
Colleagues, that has been carried. The result is as follows. Yes, 61. No, there were no noes and no abstentions. Thank you very much. I will now move on to vote on recommendation 1.2, which reads as follows. A 2% increase in the adult social care precept a charge which central government has assumed all councils will levy in its spending power calculations. Chief Executive.
I will now call each member by surname in alphabetical order. When you are called, please indicate your intention by stating yes, no or abstain. Councillor Ali.
Yes.
Councillor Audsley. Yes. Councillor Avis.
Yes.
Councillor Baines.
Yes.
Oh dear.
Sorry. Sorry, for clarification, Councillor Baines.
Yes.
One more time. Councillor Bennett.
Let me think about it. Yes.
Councillor Bird.
Aye.
Sorry. Councillor Bird.
Aye.
Councillor Bonner.
Yes.
Councillor Brew.
Yes.
Councillor Butler.
Yes.
Councillor Buttinger. Councillor Canning.
Yes.
Councillor Chatterjee.
Yes.
Councillor Chowdhury. Councillor Clancy.
Aye.
Councillor Clowder.
Yes.
Councillor Collins. Yes. Councillor Kriatura.
Aye.
Councillor Jason Cummings.
Yes.
Councillor Patsy Cummings.
Yes.
Councillor Fitzsimons. Yes. Councillor Flemming. Yes. Councillor Gatland. Yes. Councillor Godfrey. Yes. Councillor Hale. Yes. Councillor Hall.
Yeah.
Councillor Hayes Justice.
Yes.
Councillor Henson.
Yes.
Councillor Hollins. Councillor Hopley. Yes. Councillor Jewett. Councillor Kabir. Yes. Councillor Bernadette Khan. Yes. Councillor Shafi Khan. Yes. Councillor King. Yes. Councillor Tony Letts.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Mann.
Yes.
Councillor Mansell.
Yes.
Councillor Dudley Mead.
Yes.
Councillor Margaret Mead. Yes. Councillor Mohan. Yes. Councillor Neal.
Yes.
Councillor Newman.
Yes.
Councillor O'Connell. Yes. Councillor Pelling. Yes. Councillor Perry. Yes. Councillor Helen Pollard. Councillor Tim Pollard.
Yes.
Councillor Prince.
Yes.
Councillor Kadir. Yes. Councillor Rendell. Yes. Councillor Ryan. Yes. Councillor Scott. Yes. Councillor Selva. Yes. Councillor Shahul Hamid.
Yes.
Councillor Speakman. Yes. Councillor Stranick. Yes. Councillor Thompson. Absent. Councillor Watson.
Yes.
Councillor Wentworth.
Yes.
Councillor Winborn.
Yes.
Councillor Wood. Yes. Councillor Woodley.
Yes.
Councillor Wright. Absent. Councillor Young.
Yes.
62. 62 this time. 62. This says Councillor Hayes Justice turned up just before the vote. So 62 no, noes and no abstentions.
That concludes the poll, and we have yes 62. We have, because Councillor Hayes Justice has arrived and was voted that time round. Noes, we have no noes and no abstentions. I will now move to the vote on recommendation 1.3. And it states, this council welcomes the GLA increase of 5.07%, where over 81% of which is being used for the police and 16% being used for the fire service. With reference to the principles for 2018-19 determined by the Secretary of State under Section 52 ZC subsection 1 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992, in brackets as amended, confirm that in accordance with Section 52 ZB subsection 1, the council tax and the GLA precept referred to above are not excessive in terms of the most recently issued principles, and as such to note that no referendum is required. Chief Executive.
I will I will now call each member by surname in alphabetical order. When you are called, please indicate your intention by saying yes, no or abstain. Councillor Ali.
Yes.
Councillor Audsley. Yes. Councillor Avis.
Yes.
Councillor Baines.
Yes.
Councillor Bennett. Councillor Bird.
Aye.
Councillor Bonner.
Yes.
Councillor Brew.
Yes.
Councillor Butler.
Yes.
Councillor Buttinger.
Aye.
Councillor Canning. Councillor Chatterjee.
Yes.
Councillor Chowdhury. Councillor Clancy.
Aye.
Councillor Clowder.
Yes.
Councillor Collins.
Yes.
Councillor Creatura.
Aye.
Councillor Jason Cummings.
Yes.
Councillor Patsy Cummings.
Yes.
Councillor Fitzsimons.
Yes.
Councillor Flemming. Yes. Councillor Gatland. Yes. Councillor Godfrey. Yes. Councillor Hale. Yes. Councillor Hall.
Yes.
Councillor Hayes Justice.
It's Hay Justice, yes.
Apologies, Councillor. Councillor Henson.
Yes.
Councillor Hollins. Yes. Councillor Hopley. Councillor Jewett. Yes. Councillor Kabir.
Yes.
Councillor Bernadette Khan. Yes. Councillor Shafi Khan. Yes. Councillor King. Yes. Councillor Letts.
Yes.
Councillor Lewis.
Yes.
Councillor Mann.
Yes.
Councillor Mansell.
Yes.
Councillor Dudley Mead.
Yes.
Councillor Margaret Mead. Yes. Councillor Mohan. Yes. Councillor Neal.
Yes.
Councillor Newman.
Yes.
Councillor O'Connell. Yes. Councillor Pelling.
Yes.
Councillor Perry. Yes. Councillor Helen Pollard. Yes. Councillor Tim Pollard.
Yes.
Councillor Prince.
Yes.
Councillor Kadir. Yes. Councillor Rendell. Yes. Councillor Ryan. Yes. Councillor Scott. Yes. Councillor Silva. Yes. Councillor Shahul Hamid.
Yes.
Councillor Speakman. Yes. Councillor Stranick. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Watson.
Yes.
Councillor Wentworth.
Yes.
Councillor Winborn. Yes. Councillor Wood. Yes. Councillor Woodley.
Yes.
Councillor Wright. Absent. Councillor Young.
Yes.
62? Yeah. 62.
Thank you very, very much, Chief Executive. And that concludes the poll vote. Yes, 62, and there were no noes and no abstentions. We are now going to vote on remaining recommendations contained in the report at 1.4 to 1.8, as listed on page 23 of the agenda. The vote will be taken in the ordinary manner by asking for a yes or a no declaration from the Chamber. I shall now take the vote on these recommendations. Will those in favour of the recommendations please say yes? Yes. Those opposed to the recommendations, please say no. Thank you. The yes have it. Item 7 is the recommendation from the Cabinet or Committee, and we have two items to consider this evening. Item 7.1 is recommendation from the Cabinet for the Treasury Management Policy Statement. The 9 recommendations can be found on pages 146 and 147. Councillor Hall, do you move the 9 recommendations as stated in the report?
I move.
Councillor Collins, do you second the 9 recommendations?
I second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. I will now put the 9 recommendations to the vote. Those in favour, please say yes. Yes. Are there any against? Please say no. Well, I think the yeses have it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We will now move to item 7.2, which is recommendations from the Cabinet Member of Homes, Regeneration and Planning under the powers delegated by the Leader of the Council, and is a recommendation to adopt the Council Local Plan. The documentation for this recommendation can be found on page 187 of the agenda. Councillor Butler, do you move the recommendation as stated in the report? You have no more than 3 minutes. Councillor Butler.
Madam Mayor, the Croydon Plan has huge significance for the borough and sets out our vision for the next 20 years. A vision that is ambitious for Croydon and, above all, values what is best for Croydon. We live in the most fantastic of boroughs and we are a diverse community rich in spirit. We are made up of many places, from Wadden to New Addington and Upper Norwood to Coulsdon. And this plan covers all of these places and has ambition for them all. Croydon is a London borough that has so much to offer. We are London's growth borough, and this plan will ensure that this growth is sustainable and meets the needs of our children and the children to come. This plan will provide planning policy to deliver much-needed homes. It will guide on the regeneration of our district centres and strengthen our neighbourhoods. It will safeguard our employment space. It will celebrate our parks and open spaces, ensuring they are protected for future generations. We have a plan that designates new local and neighbourhood centres across the borough, designates 25 new local heritage areas, and to ensure housing need is fairly met, designates 4 areas of intensification where gradual evolution can take place. The plan provides additional, as in much more than before, green belt and MOL land protection across the borough. The plan has been over 4 years in the making, so I'd particularly like to thank those who have given their time and effort to ensuring we deliver a plan that is both sound and fit for purpose. I'd like to thank Councillor Jason Perry for his initial work. I'd like to thank our council staff, and in particular Vincent Lacovera, Sonna Roberts, Savannah Siragusa, Julia Hurley, Tom Bergin, Kieran Gilmore, Frank Hagan, Jennifer Wade, Steve Wingrave, Richard Freeman, Claire Hayward and Tom Selby. And I would like to give an absolute special mention to 3 people who have lived and breathed this plan. Councillor Paul Scott, Dominic Menny and Steve Dennington. I am humbled by your passion and commitment. Without them, we would not have such an excellent outcome. Madam Mayor, I recommend the adoption of the plan.
Well done.
Thank you very much. Councillor Scott, do you second the recommendation?
Delighted to second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Now, colleagues, I have received written notice that Councillor Perry wishes to propose to defer this item for debate. Councillor Perry, can you confirm that this is still the case?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stranack, I understand that you wish to second the recommendation being deferred for debate. Is that still the case?
I do, and I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much. Now, as this is the last items on tonight's agenda, we will move straight into the debate. There will be a total of 6 speakers, and then the amendment will be put to the vote. And this is in accordance with paragraph 3.54 of the A4 on the Constitution. Written notice is required of a proposed amendment or the reasons for the recommendation to be referred back to a Cabinet member. Chief Executive, can you please read out the written notice? Thank you.
The amendment reads, we, the Conservative Group, request that the recommendation to adopt the Croydon Local Plan be referred back to the Cabinet for further consideration, as the plan in its current form is not fit for purpose. In particular, reconsideration must be given to the 31 parks and green spaces losing local protected status, unnecessary intensification zones and the loss of precious green belt.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. Councillor Perry, you have no more than 5 minutes to move the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I have indeed asked that this recommendation go back to Cabinet for further consideration, but I would firstly like to pay tribute to the huge efforts made by our officers in the preparation of this plan. They have put a huge amount of effort in over the years, and they've been rightly congratulated by the Cabinet member. However, much of the plan is driven by political priorities, and I do believe that reconsideration should be given to some key issues, namely the loss of local protection for 31 of our green spaces, the loss of green belt and arbitrary intensification zones. I've no doubt that members opposite will tell us that this is the local plan enforced upon them by the independent inspector appointed by the government. But that is simply not the case. The inspector was responding to the evidence provided by this council, and he found that evidence to be lacking in many areas. It is lamentable that this local plan sees the total removal of the local green space designation. This administration have had years to prepare this plan, their plan, and when it comes to one of our greatest assets, our green spaces, they failed to talk, consult or engage with the fantastic friends groups across this borough. Friends groups that could have provided the much needed evidence to confirm to the inspector that our green spaces are indeed special. But sadly that information was not provided to explain the particular importance of these spaces to our local communities. Instead, the council relied on evidence from other neighbourhood plans, and the inspector considered that a sample of 7 out of 340 neighbourhood plans was not regarded as a suitable sample. He further commented, "I have serious concerns that the council's assessment of the proposed local green space designation has not been carried out with sufficient rigour nor focused fully on the stringent criteria." But he went on, so as not to delay the process, he recommended that it be removed. Quite clearly, the council could have delayed this process to allow the proper consideration of local green space designation. Instead, the council are now relying on policy protection within the London Plan and the National Planning Policy Framework. But these policies allow for land swaps and do not give guaranteed protections to the 31 spaces that are left unprotected. With regard to Greenbelt, through this plan we will see the de-designation of Coombe Road playing fields from Greenbelt status. The inspector was minded to remove this site from the plan and to leave it as Greenbelt. However, this council put its contractual arrangements ahead of the needs of local residents in the Greenbelt. If the council had properly consulted local residents, they would have found that the use of Conduit Lane and the old nursery site would have been a preferred option. And it became apparent at the public examination into the plan that there are only minor impediments to the use of that nursery site. Instead, we are faced with this administration's choice to de-designate the site from Greenbelt. The final element that needs reconsideration is the introduction of intensification zones in Forestdale, Shirley, Kenley and South Croydon. During the examination in public, the inspector clearly struggled with this policy and, as in many areas of the plan, sought numerous modifications to this element of the plan. We know that we have challenging housing targets in this borough, but this administration's drawing of the intensification zones will see large areas of residential streets sucked into the zones. Far too much of the hinterland was included in the zones, and the inspector sought their revision. The boundaries were indeed redrafted, and a policy context was drawn up to match those boundaries, but still the zones are too large. Despite the modifications, the inspector still found that the resulting boundaries appeared arbitrary in places dividing two identical properties by policy boundary. These boundaries need further revision. Madam Mayor, Croydon's local plan is this administration's local plan. It has not been forced upon them by the inspector, but rather it is their vision and their priority. I think in 3 key areas this plan will not serve this town well. 31 parks or open spaces are left vulnerable, Greenbelt is lost and residential roads are subject to intrusive intensification. In the interest of the residents of this town, I move that these items be reconsidered by Cabinet, and I refer this item back to Cabinet. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Butler, you have 4 minutes for your response.
I would like to thank Councillor Perry for giving me the opportunity to discuss one of my favourite subjects, Croydon's local plan, twice in one evening. Unfortunately, this motion is just so predictable. Only Councillor Perry could say that a plan found sound by his own government's appointed inspector is not sound. Perhaps he believes he has more expertise than the inspector. And that's why this motion is disappointing, because I fear it is not about what is best for the people of Croydon. Let's face it, from the day the people of Croydon decided they did not want those sitting opposite us to lead this council, their tune has changed over the local plan. They have forgotten that they are still meant to do what is best for Croydon. So let us be absolutely clear. We put before the government inspector a plan that was well researched and evidence-based, and that was best for Croydon, the borough. And not just for Croydon today, Croydon tomorrow and in the future. A plan to ensure all our children have homes. And this plan has probably had more scrutiny, including a public inquiry, than any other document that has come before this council. And a government-appointed inspector has found it sound and fit for purpose. Now, the inspector did suggest and make modifications. We did not agree with all of these and made the representations on some. And when the inspector agreed with some of those reps, we were pleased. However, we were deeply disappointed that despite our representations and those of local communities, the inspector decided not to create local green spaces. But we welcomed his reassurance that these spaces are still protected by both national planning policy and the Mayor's London Plan. Knowing this, we did not frighten residents by pretending their parks are at risk. We were grown up and honest, a lesson Councillor Perry could learn from. Of course, he will say under him this would never have happened, but he knows this is not true, because I have here a joint letter from Councillor Perry and myself dated the 10th of October 2017, making a joint representation for local green spaces, rejected by the inspector. The first untruth of your motion, parks and green spaces losing protected status, a designation they never had. The second untruth, unnecessary intensification zones. I suppose it depends on how you look at it. If you do not accept there is a housing crisis, then it is unnecessary. If you think it's acceptable for children in this borough to be living in bed and breakfast, then it is unnecessary. If you think the plight of hundreds of young people who can never see themselves getting a home of their own doesn't matter, then it is unnecessary. If you think the hundreds of families that present themselves as homeless should just go elsewhere, then it is unnecessary. But I believe we were elected to be the voice of these people, those who never seem to get a say in whether new homes are necessary, but who need them most. The third untruth, the loss of precious greenbelt. We all agree that greenbelt is precious, but I will never apologise for ensuring our children are educated in the best environment possible. If our children can be educated within green space, looking out on trees instead of roads and cars, then I will celebrate that. And you know full well, whereas this council and this administration requested permission to educate our children in green spaces, it was the government-appointed inspector who put forward the de-designation and not at our request. Madam Mayor, I oppose this motion on the grounds it is full of untruths and does not put the people of Croydon or their welfare first.
Thank you very much. I now call Councillor Stranack to speak. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I speak to you today as a disabled resident who has lived on Forestdale for a number of years. Over the last 15 years, I have rented properties on Woodpecker Mount, Markfield and Newlands Woods. I am really concerned about the Council's local plan to intensify the area around Forestdale. I'm sure that my fellow councillors will be aware that Forestdale and Huntingfield has very low public transport accessibility levels of between 0 and 3. Residential parking on Forestdale is already a major problem. Last year, I returned from a council meeting on a snowy night, much like tonight. There was no parking on Bardolph Avenue, close to where I lived. I was therefore forced to park up the hill. When I eventually found a parking space, I realised I was never going to be able to get back down to my house unaided. Eventually, I had to call some friends in New Addington who drove to where I was and helped me get back home. I also run a neighbourhood care charity that looks after over 300 elderly and vulnerable clients living in the local area. Most people become clients of my charity when they are told by doctors or they decide for themselves that they can no longer drive. They are concerned that without the support of the services we provide, they will quickly become lonely and isolated. Nearly 1 in 5 residents living in Forestdale is over 65. They rely on their cars to get around. Yet this local plan is proposing doubling the building heights of residential properties around Forestdale, which will double the population looking for parking spaces on already congested local roads. Labour councillors will tell you that it's okay because we can learn to walk a bit more, or we can learn to ride our bikes, or we can use public transport. For elderly and disabled people living on Forestdale, this is simply not the case. They need a car that they can park close to their homes to be able to get out and about, meet friends and socialise with the wider community. Most of the intensification zones set out in the local plan are in areas where the numbers of older people live. I understand that you have a utopian vision where no one uses a car, but we all cycle, walk, use public transport. The reality is that public transport infrastructure and the age profile of the population in your intensification zones just don't add up. Instead of creating low-car, low-polluting, high-intensity residential areas in Croydon, your plan is about to create a number of ghettos of loneliness and isolation across the south of the borough. I'm asking you to have a heart this evening. Stop creating these ghettos of loneliness and isolation before it's too late. I urge you to take the report back to Cabinet and reconsider these intensification zones. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. I now call on Councillor Prince to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to confess I'm puzzled by the thinking behind this motion. The request is to delay adopting the plan so that the Cabinet can look at it again. The trouble is that the ambitions the plan is designed to achieve and the problems it sets out to resolve have been nigh on 4 years in the making. We've heard about the complexities and the detailed process tonight. Now, I have every admiration for my Cabinet colleagues, but the opposition proposal that this sterling group of people can find a different set of solutions in a matter of weeks is, quite frankly, a level of flattery and sucking up that I just can't stomach. Let's look at some of the challenges that this plan addresses. Firstly, housing. In my ward of Wadden, we constantly see people who are desperate for secure homes. Even those who have homes are worried about where their children are going to live. They don't want to leave Croydon altogether, even if they could afford to, and they don't want to see their children move away either. The number of new homes needed in the borough can't be achieved without some controlled intensification of the suburbs. It's not enough just to add to the density in the north or build ever more and higher blocks in the town centre, although these things have their place too. And it's not just housing, it's the infrastructure that goes with it. I have every sympathy with Councillor Stranack's experiences over parking. But the opposition knows as well as I do that without a plan that covers transport issues and community facilities like schools, developers will just not provide those things. And the plan also includes employment, cultural and leisure facilities, new neighbourhood centres, all the things that make a place somewhere that people want to live and work in. A good example of that, finally, is what many people in this chamber and outside might consider one of the most important changes of all. The plan will increase the level of protection for pubs. Yes, anyone who wants to knock down a public house in future will have to jump through a lot of hoops before they can do it. Seriously, Madam Mayor, it's crucial for any local authority to have an up-to-date plan. Without one, developers will just be able to do what they like, regardless of heritage or anything. So let's adopt Croydon's plan tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Prince. I now invite Councillor Baines to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, the mask has slipped. Labour, the so-called party of the people, are anything but. The Croydon local plan is the latest in a long litany of mocking the public. The people of Croydon are now well used to opposing unsuitable planning applications only to be ignored. The long-suffering people of Croydon write letters, organise petitions, make reasonable suggestions, but they are treated with disdain by this Labour-run council at every turn. And so it is with this Croydon local so-called plan. It's not a plan at all. A plan would be thought through and considered. A plan would listen to people's views. A plan would be the result of a fair process. No, what we have here, Madam Mayor, is not a local plan. It is an ideological imposition on the people of Croydon. This Labour group is blindly implementing its ideology to build, build, build. Any kind of dwelling, in any space, no regard for the consequences for traffic, doctors' surgeries or schools, and precious little thought to the character of a local area. Actually, precious little thought doesn't quite give it the right justice. What we've been witnessing for too long now is a wholesale mocking of local character, as Labour gleefully lords it over local people and their entirely justified objections. And so, Madam Mayor, given this awful track record, we are now asked to go along with this local plan as if everything will be just fine. Well, it won't be just fine. 31 parks and green spaces will lose local protected status. This, combined with unnecessary intensification zones,
Madam Mayor,
will wreak havoc in the borough.
Information.
To take one area.
Councillor Baines,
That
1
is
second.
not true.
Can I carry on, please, Madam Mayor, without being interrupted by
No, I've raised a point, Madam
rabble
Mayor.
over there? Please, can I finish my speech?
Just because you keep lying.
They
Tell her to sit down.
cannot. The opposition cannot continuously
Please sit down so I
claim
can finish my
they will
speech.
lose a status which they do not have. It
Point
is
of
a
order.
complete fabrication.
Yeah, well done.
You may continue, Councillor Baines.
I think the truth is hurting, Madam Mayor. 31 parks and green spaces will lose protected status. This, combined with unnecessary intensification zones, will wreak havoc in the borough. To take
Can
one
we allow
area...
the Speaker to speak?
Thank you, thank you. I think they'll need to be quiet.
I will
The
give
truth
you.
hurts?
I will
Okay.
give you 25 seconds
Thank you.
to carry on.
Thank you. To take one area completely at random, the eastern part of Addiscombe is already suffering from overcrowding in certain areas, ill-thought-out one-way streets, and even more ill-conceived proposals for more one-way streets. Residents on many streets complain bitterly about parking problems caused by inappropriate planning permission with not enough parking spaces provided, with the only solution available to them to pay for a dropped curb and concrete over their front gardens. How many minutes did they take? Not that much time. Okay. I support the motion.
Thank you. Finally, I call on Councillor Scott to speak. You have no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To quote Sajid Javid MP, Secretary of State responsible for housing, we've got a housing crisis. We've got no time for anyone who is just anti-development for the sake of it. We need to change our attitude. If you are NIMBY, the government is not going to be your friend. We are on the side of people who want more homes. That is why his government inspector found this local plan very much fit for purpose. What Javid's statement says to me is that we all need to be working together to solve our housing crisis, which is why the motion before us is disappointing. But recently, a Tory councillor told the Planning Committee there isn't a housing crisis. There's just a financial crisis because people can't afford to buy or rent. We don't need more homes, just richer people, apparently. That's how out of touch some of them are. We also hear from the Tories that special suburbs should be kept exclusive for those who can afford large homes with big gardens, protected from newer, smaller, more affordable flats. Our local Tories don't like garden grabbing, yet their own property on Brighton Road, they decided backland development was OK, without even any parking. Secretly, some of them even hope to build new homes on the Webb estate. They don't like intensification areas, and yet they introduced the idea through their initial policies and proposals in 2013. Yet their proposed 14-storey landmark tower for the centre of Purley is a good example of how radical our Tory friends can be when they want to be. Surely we all know there is a need to tackle this housing crisis together. It cannot remain the political football it has been for many years. In developing this local plan, we have had to be bold. We already have thousands of families without a secure home. Our new schools are filling up fast with children that need homes of their own in a few years' time. We are living longer. More people need smaller, cosier homes for their retirement within their local communities. We have a plan which can integrate the 33,000 new homes our communities need, whilst also protecting our public open spaces and typical suburban gardens, space for educational, social and economic needs, and the distinct character of all parts of the borough. To limit the impact, some areas will need to evolve more than others. The biggest growth will be in the town centre, along with district centres and suitable brownfield sites. Three-storey development will be acceptable throughout our residential areas, with flats acceptable everywhere. 4 suburban areas will include modest intensification areas, allowing building heights to increase, but in so doing reducing the need for replacing existing buildings or infilling the gaps across the rest of those areas. I commend the 2018 Croydon local plan to the Council, fully fit for purpose to deliver a better home for many more over the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to put this amendment to the vote. Could those members in favour of the amendment please say yes? Yes. Can those members against the amendment please say no? No. Well, I do think noes have it. Thank you very much. As the amendment has not been carried, I shall now put the substantive motion to the vote, namely the recommendation to agree to adopt the Council Local Plan 2018 in accordance with Section 23 (5) of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004. Will those members in favour please say yes? Yes. And those against please say no. No. I think the yeses have it. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of this item and concludes the meeting. Sorry?
I just wanted a point of explanation. With 62 councillors here, do the yeses have it? Because if the Mayor and the Vice Mayor, you didn't vote, so then that would be 60 councillors. So, oh, yeah, don't worry.
I was... Councillor, we're all allowed to make mistakes every now and again. Can I just say that brings us to the end of this item and concludes this meeting of the Council. Thank you everyone for your contribution this evening. Thank you.